The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty trail as Sarah Mitchell walked beside her family's covered wagon. Her boots crunched softly on the dried leaves scattered along the path. The year was 1847, and like many families, the Mitchells were heading west toward the promise of new land and fresh opportunities. Sarah was 19 years old, with auburn hair that caught the sunlight and green eyes that held both determination and kindness. She had always been the one in her family to rush toward trouble rather than away from it. Her mother often said she had a heart too big for her own good, always trying to help others even when it put her in danger. The wagon train they traveled with consisted of 12 families, all hoping to reach Oregon Territory before winter set in. They had been on the trail for 3 months now, and the journey was wearing on everyone. The excitement of adventure had long since given way to the daily grind of walking 20 miles, making camp, and dealing with broken wagon wheels, sick animals, and dwindling supplies. Sarah's father, Thomas Mitchell, drove their wagon while her mother, Mary, walked alongside with Sarah and her younger brother, Daniel. Thomas was a quiet man who had worked as a blacksmith back in Missouri. He had strong hands and a gentle way with animals. Mary was a school teacher who insisted on continuing Daniel's lessons even on the trail. She carried her books in a special box and made sure Daniel could read and write every evening by the campfire. On this particular morning, the air felt different. There was a tension that Sarah couldn't quite explain. The horses seemed more nervous than usual, and even the birds in the trees were quieter. The wagon master, a gruff man named Captain Henry Walsh, had warned everyone the night before that they were entering territory where they needed to be extra careful. "We're passing through lands that belong to different tribes," Captain Walsh had said around the campfire. "Most are peaceful, but there have been reports of tensions between some groups and settlers. We need to stay alert and respectful." Sarah had listened carefully to these words. Unlike many of the other settlers, she didn't view the native peoples as enemies. Her grandmother had told her stories about the Cherokee people who had once lived near their home in Missouri. Grandmother Mitchell spoke of them with respect, describing their wisdom, their connection to the land, and the terrible injustices they had faced. As the morning progressed, the wagon train moved through a narrow valley surrounded by tall pine trees. The trail here was rockier, and the wagons had to move more slowly to avoid damage. Sarah noticed smoke in the distance and pointed it out to her mother. "Probably just someone's cooking fire," Mary said, but Sarah could hear the uncertainty in her voice. The smoke grew thicker as they moved forward, and soon they could smell burning wood and something else, something that made Sarah's stomach turn. Captain Walsh rode back from the front of the train, his face grim. "There's been trouble ahead," he announced. "Looks like raiders hit a small wagon, probably a family traveling alone. We need to be ready for anything." The families quickly organized themselves for defense, with the men checking their rifles and the women gathering the children close to the wagons. Sarah felt her heart racing, not from fear for herself, but from worry about what they might find ahead. As they rounded a bend in the trail, they saw the source of the smoke. A single covered wagon sat in a clearing, flames licking at its canvas top and wooden sides. The horses that had been pulling it were nowhere to be seen, probably run off by whoever had attacked the wagon. "Stay with the train," Captain Walsh ordered. "We'll investigate." But Sarah's attention was caught by something else. Through the smoke and flames, she thought she saw movement inside the burning wagon. She squinted, trying to see more clearly. Yes, there was definitely someone in there, someone small. "Captain Walsh," she called out. "There's someone still in that wagon." The wagon master looked where she was pointing and shook his head grimly. "If there is, they're already gone. That fire's too hot to get close to." But Sarah was already moving. She had seen what looked like a child's hand reaching out from under a pile of burning canvas. Without thinking about the danger, she started running toward the wagon. "Sarah, no!" her mother screamed behind her. Her father tried to catch up to her, but Sarah was fast and determined. She reached the wagon before anyone could stop her. The heat hit her like a wall, and the smoke made her eyes water and her lungs burn. But she could see clearly now. There was a girl inside, maybe 10 or 11 years old, trapped under some fallen cargo. The girl was conscious but weak from smoke. Her long black hair was singed, and her clothes were torn. She looked up at Sarah with dark eyes full of pain and fear. "I'm going to get you out," Sarah said, though she wasn't sure the girl could hear her over the crackling of the flames. The side of the wagon was too high to climb easily, especially with the fire spreading. Sarah looked around frantically and spotted a large rock. She rolled it over to the wagon and used it to boost herself up. The heat was incredible now, and she could feel it beginning to burn her exposed skin. Inside the wagon, she could see that the girl was pinned under a heavy wooden crate. Sarah grabbed the crate and lifted with all her strength, ignoring the pain in her hands as she touched the hot wood. The girl was able to slide out from under it. "Can you walk?" Sarah asked. The girl nodded weakly, and Sarah helped her stand. But as they moved toward the back of the wagon, a burning support beam crashed down, blocking their path. The front of the wagon was completely engulfed in flames now. They were trapped. Sarah looked around desperately. The only way out was to jump from the side of the wagon, but it was a long drop, and the girl was too weak to make it safely. Sarah made a quick decision. She tore off her thick woolen shawl and wrapped it around the girl to protect her from the heat. "Hold on tight to me," she told the girl. "We're going to jump together." The girl wrapped her thin arms around Sarah's neck, and Sarah climbed up onto the side rail of the wagon. Below them, her father and several other men had gathered, holding out their arms to catch them. "Jump, Sarah!" her father yelled. "The whole thing's about to collapse." Sarah took a deep breath and leaped from the burning wagon, holding the girl tightly against her chest. For a moment, they were flying through the air, surrounded by smoke and falling sparks. Then strong hands caught them, and they tumbled safely to the ground. Thomas Mitchell carried both girls away from the wagon, just as the entire structure collapsed in a shower of sparks and burning wood. Sarah's mother rushed to her side, checking her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" Mary asked, her voice shaking with fear and relief. Sarah looked down at her hands, which were red and blistered from the heat. Her dress was torn and blackened with smoke, and she could feel burns on her arms and face, but she was alive, and more importantly, so was the girl she had saved. "I'm fine, Ma," Sarah said. "But we need to help her." The girl lay on the ground beside them, still conscious but clearly suffering from smoke inhalation and burns. Mary Mitchell immediately went to work, using water from their supply to clean the girl's wounds and checking her for serious injuries. As Mary tended to the girl, Sarah got her first good look at her. She appeared to be Cherokee, with beautiful dark skin and high cheekbones. Her clothes, though torn and burned, were well made and decorated with intricate beadwork. This was not the child of poor travelers. Her family had clearly been people of some importance. "Where are your parents, child?" Mary asked gently as she bandaged a cut on the girl's arm. The girl's eyes filled with tears, and she spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft, and she spoke with an accent that Sarah couldn't quite place. "Gone," the girl whispered. "The bad men took them away. They said terrible things about our people. They burned everything." Sarah felt a surge of anger. She had heard stories about raiders who targeted Native American families, stealing from them and worse. The fact that this child had been left to die in the fire filled her with rage. "What's your name?" Sarah asked, kneeling down beside the girl. "Ayanna," the girl replied. "It means eternal blossom in my language." "That's a beautiful name," Sarah said with a smile. "I'm Sarah. You're safe now, Ayanna. My family will take care of you." Captain Walsh had been examining the scene around the burned wagon. He came over to where they were caring for Ayanna, his expression troubled. This wasn't random. he said quietly to Thomas Mitchell. Whoever did this knew exactly who they were targeting. They took the horses and anything valuable, but they left behind some things that regular thieves would have taken. Sarah overheard this conversation and felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" she asked. Captain Walsh hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I mean, someone wanted to hurt this particular family for a specific reason. The question is why and whether they might come back looking for survivors." This news made everyone in the wagon train nervous. They were still several days away from the nearest fort, and they had women and children to protect. But Sarah looked down at Ayanna, who was now resting more peacefully, thanks to her mother's care, and knew there was no question about what they had to do. "She's coming with us," Sarah declared. Her father nodded in agreement. "Of course she is. We can't leave a child alone out here." Mary finished bandaging Ayanna's wounds and helped her sit up to drink some water. The girl was clearly exhausted, but she managed to smile at Sarah. "Thank you," Ayanna said. "You saved my life." "Anyone would have done the same thing," Sarah replied, though they both knew that wasn't true. Many people would have been too afraid to risk their own lives for a stranger. As the wagon train prepared to move on, Sarah helped Ayanna into their family wagon. She made a comfortable place for the girl to rest among the family's belongings, using extra blankets to make a soft bed. During the rest of that day's journey, Sarah learned more about Ayanna. The girl was indeed Cherokee, and she spoke both her native language and English fluently. Her family had been traveling to meet with relatives in the Colorado Territory when they were attacked. "My grandfather is a respected leader among our people," Ayanna explained as they bounced along in the wagon. "He has been trying to help families find safe places to live after what happened to us in the old territories." Sarah knew she was referring to the forced removal of Cherokee people from their ancestral lands, something that had happened when Sarah was just a child, but that her grandmother had spoken about with great sadness. "Where is your grandfather now?" Sarah asked. "I don't know," Ayanna admitted. "We were supposed to meet him, but now—" Her voice trailed off, and Sarah could see the worry and grief in her eyes. As evening approached, the wagon train made camp in a defensive circle. Captain Walsh posted extra guards, still concerned about the possibility of more trouble. The families gathered around their cooking fires, but the mood was somber. Everyone was thinking about what had happened to Ayanna's family and wondering if they might be next. Sarah sat with Ayanna by their family's fire, helping her eat some of the stew Mary had prepared. The girl was looking stronger, though Sarah could see that her physical injuries were nothing compared to the emotional trauma she had experienced. "Do you have other family?" Sarah asked gently. Ayanna nodded. "Many. The Cherokee people are like a large family. We take care of each other, but I don't know how to find them from here." "We'll figure it out," Sarah promised. "My family will help you." As the night grew darker, the two girls sat together under the stars. Ayanna began to tell Sarah about her people's traditions and beliefs. She spoke of the connection between all living things, the importance of respecting the earth, and the wisdom passed down through generations. "My grandmother always said that sometimes the spirits guide us to be exactly where we need to be at the right time," Ayanna said thoughtfully. "Maybe that's why you were there today when I needed help." Sarah looked up at the stars and thought about the events of the day. She had acted on instinct when she saw Ayanna trapped in the burning wagon. She hadn't thought about the danger to herself or considered whether she was strong enough to save someone else. She had just seen another person in need and known that she had to try to help. "My grandmother used to tell me stories about the Cherokee people," Sarah said. "She said they were the wisest and most honorable people she had ever known." Ayanna smiled, the first real smile Sarah had seen from her since the rescue. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman herself." As they prepared for sleep, Sarah helped Ayanna settle into the comfortable bed they had made for her in the wagon. The girl was clearly exhausted from her ordeal, but she seemed reluctant to close her eyes. "What if the bad men come back?" Ayanna whispered. "They won't," Sarah said firmly. "And even if they did, you're safe now. My father and the other men are keeping watch, and I'll be right here beside you." Ayanna reached out and took Sarah's hand. "I will never forget what you did for me today," she said. "In my culture, when someone saves your life, it creates a bond that can never be broken. You are my sister now. Always." Sarah felt honored by these words, though she didn't fully understand their significance. She squeezed Ayanna's hand gently. "Get some rest," Sarah said. "Tomorrow we'll start figuring out how to find your family." As Ayanna finally drifted off to sleep, Sarah lay awake thinking about the day's events. She had always known she was the kind of person who would help others, but she had never been tested like this before. Rushing into that burning wagon had been the most frightening and dangerous thing she had ever done, but she knew she would do it again without hesitation. What she didn't know was how this one act of courage would change not just her own life, but the lives of many others. The girl she had saved was far more important than anyone realized, and the bond they had formed would lead to discoveries that none of them could imagine. The wagon train continued its journey west, carrying with it a new member who would bring both challenges and unexpected blessings. And Sarah Mitchell, the young woman who had rushed into flames to save a stranger, had no idea that she had just taken the first step on a path that would reveal secrets about her own family's past and connect her to a heritage she never knew existed. The next 3 days passed peacefully as the wagon train continued westward. Ayanna's strength returned quickly, though the sadness in her eyes remained. She and Sarah had become inseparable, sharing stories, helping with daily chores, and walking together beside the wagon for hours each day. Sarah was amazed by how much Ayanna knew about the natural world around them. The Cherokee girl could identify every plant they passed, explaining which ones were good for medicine, which could be eaten, and which were dangerous. She showed Sarah how to read signs in the landscape that indicated water sources or changes in weather. "Your people know so much about living with the land," Sarah said as they walked through a grove of oak trees. Ayanna had just pointed out which acorns were safe to eat and how to prepare them. "We have lived here for many generations," Ayanna replied. "The land teaches you if you know how to listen." Mary Mitchell had also grown fond of Ayanna. She was impressed by the girl's intelligence and her knowledge of 2 languages. In the evenings, Mary would help Ayanna practice her English reading, while Ayanna taught Sarah and Daniel some words in Cherokee. "Osio," Ayanna would say, which meant hello. "Wado" meant thank you. Daniel, who was only 12, thought learning Cherokee words was the most exciting thing that had happened on the entire journey. He followed Ayanna around asking her to teach him more, and she was patient with his endless questions. Thomas Mitchell was also impressed by Ayanna, but for different reasons. He noticed how she carried herself with a dignity that seemed unusual for such a young girl. There was something almost regal in her manner, the way she spoke carefully and thoughtfully, always choosing her words with care. On the 4th day after the rescue, their peaceful journey was interrupted. Captain Walsh rode back from his scouting position ahead of the train, his face serious. "There's a group approaching from the north," he announced. "Looks like Cherokee riders. About 6 or 7 of them." Fear rippled through the wagon train. Many of the settlers had heard stories about conflicts between tribes and wagon trains, though most of these stories were exaggerated or completely false. But Ayanna's reaction was completely different. Her face lit up with hope and excitement. "Could it be?" she whispered to Sarah. "Could they be looking for me?" Captain Walsh organized the wagons into a defensive position, but Sarah noticed that Ayanna was not afraid. Instead, she climbed up onto their wagon to get a better view of the approaching riders. As the group came closer, Ayanna began to wave her arms above her head and call out in Cherokee. One of the riders responded, and soon the entire group was galloping toward the wagon train. "They're friends?" Ayanna called down to Captain Walsh. "They've been searching for me." The lead rider was a tall man with graying hair and kind eyes. He wore traditional Cherokee clothing decorated with silver ornaments and carried himself with unmistakable authority. When he saw Ayanna, his stern expression melted into one of relief and joy. The man dismounted and came quickly to their wagon. Ayanna climbed down and ran to him, and he swept her up in a fierce embrace. They spoke rapidly in Cherokee for several minutes, while the settlers watched nervously. Finally, the man turned to face the wagon train. When he spoke, his English was perfect, with only a slight accent. "I am Joseph Ross," he said, his voice carrying easily across the group. "This is my granddaughter, Ayanna Ross. We have been searching for her and her parents for many days." Captain Walsh stepped forward. "I'm Captain Henry Walsh. We found your granddaughter after her family's wagon was attacked and burned. I'm sorry to say there was no sign of her parents." Joseph Ross's face grew grave, but he nodded as if he had expected this news. "We found the site yesterday. We know what happened to them." His voice carried a weight of grief that made Sarah's heart ache. "Sir," Sarah said, stepping forward despite her mother's attempt to hold her back. "I'm Sarah Mitchell. I was able to get Ayanna out of the burning wagon." Joseph Ross turned his attention to Sarah, studying her carefully. When he spoke, his voice was warm with gratitude. "You risked your life to save my granddaughter. There is no way we can ever repay such a debt." "No repayment needed," Sarah replied. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Joseph Ross said firmly. "Not everyone would have done what you did. You have shown the kind of courage and compassion that our people honor above all other qualities." As the two groups talked, Sarah began to understand more about who Ayanna really was. Joseph Ross was not just any Cherokee leader. He was the principal chief of one of the largest Cherokee communities in the Colorado Territory. Ayanna was not just his granddaughter. She was being raised to take on important responsibilities within their community. "My granddaughter has told me much about your family," Joseph Ross said to Thomas and Mary Mitchell. "She says you have treated her with kindness and respect. This means a great deal to us." Mary stepped forward. "She has been a blessing to our family. She has taught us so much about your people and your ways." Joseph Ross smiled. "Ayanna has always been a good teacher. She takes after her grandmother in that way." As the conversation continued, Sarah learned more about the attack on Ayanna's family. A group of men had been specifically targeting Cherokee families who were traveling to join Joseph Ross's community. They were trying to prevent the Cherokee from establishing themselves in the Colorado Territory. "There are some who do not want to see our people succeed in our new homes," Joseph Ross explained. "They would rather see us scattered and broken." "That's terrible," Sarah said. "Why can't people just live together in peace?" Joseph Ross looked at her with approval. "That is a wise question, young lady. It is the same question many of us ask every day." As evening approached, Joseph Ross and his men made camp near the wagon train. Captain Walsh was initially nervous about this arrangement, but it quickly became clear that the Cherokee travelers were peaceful and actually made their camp safer. That evening, the two groups shared their evening meal. Joseph Ross's men were skilled hunters, and they contributed fresh meat to the dinner. The Cherokee travelers also had different vegetables and herbs that added wonderful flavors to the usual trail food. Sarah sat beside Ayanna during the meal, and both girls listened as Joseph Ross told stories about Cherokee history and traditions. He spoke of the old days in the Eastern Territories, before the forced removal, and of the new communities they were building in the West. "We have learned that we must be strong and adaptable," he said. "The world around us has changed, but our people and our values remain the same." After dinner, Joseph Ross asked to speak privately with Sarah and her family. They walked a little distance from the main group and sat around a small fire that Thomas had built. "I want to thank you again for saving Ayanna," Joseph Ross began. "But I also want to tell you something that may surprise you." He looked directly at Sarah. "When I first saw you today, I thought you looked familiar. After hearing your family name and talking with Ayanna about your grandmother's stories, I believe I know why." Sarah felt her heart begin to beat faster. "What do you mean?" "Tell me," Joseph Ross said to Thomas Mitchell, "was your mother's maiden name MacLeod?" Thomas looked surprised. "Yes, it was. How did you know that?" Joseph Ross smiled. "Because I knew Eleanor MacLeod many years ago, before she married your father. She was a remarkable woman who showed great kindness to our people during very difficult times." Sarah's eyes widened. Eleanor MacLeod had been her grandmother's name, but her grandmother had died when Sarah was very young. She had only a few memories of her, and her father rarely talked about his mother. "Your grandmother," Joseph Ross continued, "helped many Cherokee families during the removal. She and her family lived near our old territory in Georgia, and when the soldiers came to force us from our homes, she provided food, shelter, and aid to anyone who needed it." Thomas Mitchell's face showed his amazement. "I knew my mother was kind to the Cherokee people, but I never knew the details." "She saved many lives," Joseph Ross said seriously. "But more than that, she formed deep friendships with our people. She was especially close to my sister, Ayanna's grandmother." Ayanna gasped. "You mean Sarah's grandmother knew my grandmother?" "More than that," Joseph Ross said. "They were like sisters. When the removal happened and families were separated, your grandmother promised my sister that their families would always be connected, that the friendship would pass down through generations." Sarah felt a strange, tingling sensation as she listened to this story. "Are you saying that my grandmother and Ayanna's grandmother were friends?" "The closest of friends," Joseph Ross confirmed. "Your grandmother even wore a Cherokee friendship bracelet that my sister made for her. Do you know if your family still has any of her belongings?" Mary Mitchell suddenly stood up. "Wait here," she said, and hurried back to their wagon. She returned a few minutes later carrying a small wooden box. "This belonged to Thomas's mother," Mary explained. "We've kept it with us, but I haven't looked inside it in years." Thomas opened the box carefully. Inside were several items, some old letters, a few pieces of jewelry, and at the bottom, a bracelet made of silver and turquoise beads woven together with leather cord. Joseph Ross drew in his breath sharply when he saw the bracelet. "That is Cherokee work," he said quietly. "Very old and very special. May I see it?" Thomas handed him the bracelet, and Joseph Ross examined it carefully. "This was made by my sister," he said with certainty. "I recognize her work. She made only a few bracelets like this, and gave them only to people she considered family." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes as she began to understand the significance of what they were learning. "So when I saved Ayanna—" "You were fulfilling a promise your grandmother made long ago," Joseph Ross finished. "Our families have been connected for generations. What happened today was not coincidence, it was destiny." Ayanna reached over and took Sarah's hand. "This means we really are sisters," she said softly. Joseph Ross nodded solemnly. In Cherokee tradition, when families are connected by bonds of friendship and mutual aid, those bonds are sacred. They pass from generation to generation. He turned to Thomas and Mary Mitchell. "Your daughter did not just save my granddaughter today. She honored a commitment made by your family before she was born. This makes you all part of our extended family." The implications of this discovery were overwhelming for Sarah. She had always felt drawn to help others, especially those who were being treated unfairly. Now she learned that this instinct might have been passed down to her, that her own grandmother had risked her safety to help Cherokee people. "What happened to Ayanna's grandmother?" Sarah asked. "And how did she and my grandmother stay in touch after the removal?" Joseph Ross's expression grew sad. "My sister died during the removal, along with many others. It was a terrible journey. But before she died, she made me promise to remember the kindness of the McLeod family and to help them if they ever needed it. And your grandmother," he continued, looking at Sarah, "wrote letters to our people for years afterward, asking about our welfare and offering to help if she could. When she stopped writing, we assumed she had died, but we never forgot her kindness." As the evening grew late, the families continued to share stories and learn about their connected histories. Sarah discovered that her grandmother had not only helped during the removal, but had also sent money and supplies to Cherokee communities for years afterward. "She never told us about any of this," Thomas said wonderingly. "She was always modest about her good deeds." "That was her way," Joseph Ross agreed. "She did not help us for recognition or praise. She helped because she believed it was right." As they prepared for sleep, Joseph Ross made an offer that surprised everyone. "My community in Colorado Territory is growing strong," he said. "We have good land, and we welcome people of all backgrounds who share our values of cooperation and respect. The Mitchell family would be honored there." Sarah felt her heart race at this suggestion. The idea of living in a community where Cherokee and white families worked together sounded wonderful to her. But she also knew it would be a big decision for her family. "That's very generous," Thomas said. "We'll certainly consider it." "There is something else," Joseph Ross said, looking directly at Sarah. "Ayanna needs to continue her education, and I believe she would benefit from learning more about the world beyond our community. If your family continues to Oregon Territory, I would like Ayanna to go with you for a time. She could attend school there and then return to us when she is older." Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. "You would trust us with Ayanna?" "You have already proven yourselves worthy of that trust," Joseph Ross replied. "And Ayanna herself has told me that she wishes to stay with your family longer." Ayanna nodded eagerly. "I want to learn more about the outside world, but I also want to stay with my new sister." That night, as Sarah lay in her bedroll beside Ayanna under the vast western sky, she thought about the incredible events of the past few days. A simple act of courage had led to the discovery of a family connection that stretched back generations. "Ayanna," she whispered, "do you really think it was destiny that brought us together?" "I believe it," Ayanna whispered back. "My grandmother always said that the spirits guide us to where we need to be. Your grandmother made a promise to mine. And today, you kept that promise without even knowing it existed." Sarah smiled in the darkness. "I'm glad we found each other." "Me too," Ayanna replied. "And this is just the beginning. I have a feeling our families are going to share many more adventures together." As Sarah drifted off to sleep, she had no idea how prophetic Ayanna's words would prove to be. The connection between their families would indeed lead to more adventures, and to discoveries about both their heritages that would amaze them both. The next morning would bring new decisions and new challenges, but Sarah felt ready for whatever came next. She had found not just a friend, but a sister, and together they would face the future with courage and hope. The following morning brought difficult decisions for both families. Joseph Ross and his men needed to return to their community to report Ayanna's safety and to prepare for potential threats from the same raiders who had attacked her family. The wagon train needed to continue west before winter weather made travel impossible. As the families gathered for breakfast, Joseph Ross approached Thomas Mitchell with a proposal that would change everything. "I have been thinking about our situation," he said. "I would like to make a formal arrangement for Ayanna to travel with your family to Oregon Territory, but I also want to offer something else." He pulled out a leather pouch and handed it to Thomas. This contains gold and silver coins, enough to purchase good land when you reach Oregon. Consider it payment for caring for Ayanna, but also an investment in our shared future." Thomas tried to refuse the money, but Joseph Ross insisted. "Your family has already given us more than we could ever repay. This is not charity, it is partnership. Cherokee people believe in supporting those who support us." Mary Mitchell had spent the morning helping Ayanna pack a small bundle of belongings that the Cherokee men had brought for her. As she watched the girl carefully fold her few possessions, Mary made a decision of her own. "Ayanna," Mary said, "I want you to know that if you come with us, you're not just traveling with us, you're becoming part of our family, completely and forever." Ayanna hugged Mary tightly. "I already feel like part of your family," she said. "You have all made me feel so loved." But Captain Walsh had concerns about their plan. He pulled Thomas aside for a private conversation. "I understand why you want to help the girl," Walsh said, "but carrying a Cherokee child might cause problems for you down the trail. Some folks don't take kindly to that sort of mixing." Thomas's response was immediate and firm. "Then those folks can keep their opinions to themselves. Ayanna is family now, and family sticks together." Sarah overheard this conversation and felt a surge of pride in her father. She had always known he was a good man, but his willingness to stand up for Ayanna, despite potential difficulties, showed real courage. As the morning progressed, Joseph Ross continued to share more stories about the connection between their families. Some of these stories revealed details that amazed everyone. "Your grandmother Eleanor," Joseph Ross told Sarah, "learned to speak some Cherokee during the years she helped our people. My sister taught her many of our customs and traditions." He paused and looked thoughtful. "In fact, there was one tradition they shared that I had almost forgotten until yesterday." "What tradition?" Sarah asked. "Among Cherokee people, when someone saves a life, especially the life of someone important to the community, they become family in a very official way. Your grandmother saved many lives, including some of my sister's children." Joseph Ross looked directly at Sarah. "By our customs, this made your grandmother an honorary member of our clan, and that honor passes down through bloodlines." Sarah felt a strange sensation as she absorbed this information. "Are you saying that that my family is—" "You are Cherokee family," Joseph Ross said simply. "Not by blood, but by honor and tradition. You have earned that title twice. Once through your grandmother's actions, and again through your own." Ayanna clapped her hands together in excitement. "This means you really are my sister in every way that matters." But Joseph Ross was not finished with his revelations. "There is something else," he said, his voice growing serious. "Something I learned yesterday when I examined your grandmother's bracelet more carefully." He took the bracelet from Thomas and pointed to some small symbols carved into one of the silver beads. "These markings tell a story. My sister did not make this bracelet just as a gift of friendship." "What do you mean?" Mary asked. "She made it as a recognition of mixed heritage," Joseph Ross explained. "These symbols indicate that the person wearing this bracelet has Cherokee blood in their family line." The silence that followed this statement was profound. Sarah felt her world shifting as she tried to understand what Joseph Ross was telling them. "Are you saying my grandmother had Cherokee ancestry?" Thomas asked quietly. Joseph Ross nodded. "The bracelet indicates that she did. My sister was very careful about such things. She would not have used these symbols unless she was certain." Sarah sat down suddenly as the implications of this discovery hit her. "So we actually do have Cherokee heritage?" "It would appear so," Joseph Ross confirmed. "Your grandmother may not have known the full details of her own family history, or she may have chosen to keep it private for safety reasons. Many people with Native ancestry hid it during difficult times." This revelation explained so many things to Sarah. Her grandmother's deep knowledge of Cherokee culture, her willingness to risk everything to help Cherokee families, and even Sarah's own instinctive understanding and respect for Cherokee traditions all made sense now. Ayanna reached over and took Sarah's hand. "Now we really are sisters," she said softly, "by tradition, by choice, and by blood." As the day progressed, the two families made their final plans. Ayanna would indeed travel with the Mitchell family to Oregon Territory. Joseph Ross would return to his community, but would send regular messengers to check on Ayanna's welfare and to maintain communication with the Mitchell family. Before they parted, Joseph Ross performed a ceremony that formally acknowledged the bonds between the families. He spoke in Cherokee while placing his hands on Sarah's and Ayanna's heads, then translated for the others. "I have asked the spirits to bless the friendship between our families and to guide both girls on their paths ahead," he explained. "I have also formally recognized Sarah as an honorary daughter of the Cherokee Nation and Ayanna as an honorary daughter of the Mitchell family." Thomas Mitchell was visibly moved by this ceremony. "We are honored by your trust and friendship," he said. As Joseph Ross and his men prepared to leave, he gave Ayanna a special gift, a small leather pouch containing sacred items from their community, including tobacco, sage, and a piece of turquoise. "These will help you remember who you are and where you come from," he told her. "But remember also that you can be Cherokee and still learn from other cultures. Your new family will teach you things that will make you a better leader for our people someday." Joseph Ross also had a gift for Sarah, a silver pendant in the shape of a feather hanging from a leather cord. "This represents courage and wisdom," he explained as he placed it around Sarah's neck. "You have shown both qualities, and they will serve you well in the years ahead." As the Cherokee riders disappeared over the hills, the wagon train continued its westward journey. But the dynamics within the group had changed. Word of Sarah's heroic rescue and the family connections that had been discovered spread throughout the wagon train, and Sarah found herself viewed with new respect by the other travelers. The days that followed were some of the happiest of the entire journey for Sarah. Having Ayanna as a constant companion made every aspect of the trail more interesting. They walked together, sharing stories and dreams for the future. Ayanna taught Sarah more Cherokee words and traditions, while Sarah helped Ayanna practice her English and learn about white customs that would be useful in Oregon Territory. Mary Mitchell incorporated both girls into daily lessons, and she was amazed by Ayanna's quick mind and eager questions. Ayanna was particularly interested in learning about different types of schools and what opportunities might be available for her education in Oregon. "I want to learn everything I can," Ayanna told Mary one evening as they sat around the campfire. "Grandfather says that knowledge is the best weapon against those who would try to keep our people down." Thomas Mitchell also grew to appreciate Ayanna's presence in their family. She had a natural talent for working with animals, and she helped him care for their oxen and horses. She also proved to be an excellent tracker and hunter, skills that were very useful on the trail. 2 weeks after Joseph Ross and his men had left them, the wagon train encountered another challenge. They reached a river crossing that was known to be dangerous, with fast-moving water and a rocky bottom that could damage wagon wheels or injure animals. Captain Walsh scouted the crossing and reported back to the group with concern. "The water's higher than usual for this time of year," he said. "We're going to have to be extra careful." As the wagons prepared to cross one by one, Ayanna noticed something that the others had missed. She pointed to a section of the riverbank upstream from where Captain Walsh planned to cross. "The water is shallower there," she observed, "and the bottom looks more solid." Sarah looked where Ayanna was pointing and could see that she was right. "Should we tell Captain Walsh?" Ayanna hesitated. He might not listen to a Cherokee girl. But Sarah was already walking toward the wagon master. "Captain Walsh, Ayanna has noticed something about the river that might help." To his credit, Captain Walsh listened carefully to Ayana's observations and then went to examine the area she had indicated. When he returned, his expression showed both admiration and gratitude. "The girl's absolutely right," he announced to the group. "That's a much better crossing point. Could have saved us from real trouble." This incident further established Ayana's reputation within the wagon train as someone whose knowledge and insights were valuable. But more importantly, it showed Sarah how her new sister's understanding of the natural world could benefit everyone around her. As they continued toward Oregon Territory, Sarah began to think seriously about their future. The connections they had discovered with the Cherokee people had opened up possibilities she had never imagined. Instead of just settling on a farm in Oregon, they could potentially be part of something larger, a community that bridged different cultures and traditions. One evening, as they camped near a clear stream with mountains visible in the distance, Sarah shared these thoughts with Ayana. "Do you think we could really create a place where Cherokee and white families could live together peacefully?" Sarah asked. Ayana considered this question seriously. "I think it's possible," she said. "But it would take people like your family, people who see others as human beings first, rather than focusing on differences." "And it would take people like you," Sarah replied. "People who can teach others and help them understand different ways of living." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a rider approaching the camp. Captain Walsh immediately went to intercept the stranger, but the man called out that he brought news and was peaceful. The rider turned out to be a messenger sent by Joseph Ross. He brought word that the Cherokee community in Colorado Territory had successfully driven off the raiders who had been attacking Cherokee families. More importantly, he carried a letter for Sarah and her family. Mary Mitchell read the letter aloud by the firelight. "Dear friends, I hope this letter finds you well and safe on your journey. I wanted you to know that the men who attacked Ayana's family have been captured and turned over to the territorial authorities. Justice will be served. I also wanted to tell you more about what I have learned regarding your family's Cherokee heritage. I have spoken with the oldest members of our community, and they remember your grandmother Eleanor well. She was not just a friend to Cherokee people. She was quarter Cherokee herself, through her father's line. This makes Sarah and her family true relatives, not just honorary ones. We would be honored if you would consider making your home near our community when you are ready to settle permanently. We have good land available, and we need people with your skills and values. Ayana, my dear granddaughter, learn everything you can, but remember that you carry the hopes of our people with you. Sarah, you have proven yourself worthy of the Cherokee blood that flows in your veins. Both of you girls have important roles to play in building bridges between our communities. With love and respect, Joseph Ross." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as the letter was read. To learn that she truly did have Cherokee ancestry and that she was considered family by people she had come to respect so deeply was overwhelming. Ayana hugged her tightly. "Now we really are blood sisters," she whispered. The final weeks of the journey to Oregon Territory passed quickly. Sarah and Ayana spent their time planning for the future and discussing the education Ayana would receive. They also talked about eventual return visits to Joseph Ross's community and the role they might play in building understanding between different groups of people. When the wagon train finally reached Oregon Territory, the Mitchell family used part of Joseph Ross's gift money to purchase land near a growing town that had good schools and opportunities for trade. They built a house with extra rooms, knowing that they would want to welcome visitors from Ayana's people and possibly other travelers who needed assistance. Ayana enrolled in the local school and quickly proved to be one of the brightest students the teacher had ever encountered. She learned rapidly and made friends easily, though she always made sure to share her Cherokee heritage proudly rather than hiding it. Sarah found work helping at the school and discovered that she had a natural talent for teaching. She particularly enjoyed working with children who were struggling with their lessons, and she found that the patience and understanding she had learned from Ayanna made her an effective teacher. The two families maintained regular correspondence with Joseph Ross and the Cherokee community. Ayanna received letters in Cherokee from her grandfather, and she would read them aloud to Sarah, translating as she went. 5 years after that fateful day when Sarah had rushed into the burning wagon, both young women had grown into remarkable individuals. Ayanna had completed her formal education and was preparing to return to her people, bringing with her knowledge that would help the Cherokee community prosper. She had also served as an ambassador of sorts, helping other white families in the area understand Cherokee culture and traditions. Sarah had become a respected teacher and community leader. She used her position to promote understanding and cooperation between different groups of people who were settling in Oregon Territory. The pendant that Joseph Ross had given her had become a symbol of her commitment to justice and helping others. On the 5th anniversary of their first meeting, the two women sat together on the porch of the Mitchell family home, watching the sunset paint the mountains in brilliant colors. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't decided to run toward that burning wagon?" Ayanna asked. Sarah considered this question. "I think I would have regretted it for the rest of my life," she said. "But I also think that somehow, some way, our families would have found each other eventually. The connection was too strong to be broken by chance." "I believe that too," Ayanna agreed. "And I believe that what we've built together, the friendships, the understanding, the bridge between our communities, this is what our grandmothers dreamed of when they first became friends so many years ago." Sarah nodded, fingering the Cherokee pendant at her throat. "Their friendship planted seeds," she said. "We just helped those seeds grow." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, both women felt the satisfaction of knowing that their bond had created something larger than themselves. The courage Sarah had shown in rushing into the flames had not just saved one life. It had restored connections between families and communities, honored the memory of previous generations, and created opportunities for future cooperation and understanding. The girl who had rushed into a flaming wagon to save a stranger had discovered that she was fulfilling a promise made by her grandmother decades earlier. In saving the Cherokee leader's heir, she had also discovered her own heritage and found her true calling as a bridge between different worlds. Their story would be told for generations in both Cherokee and white communities, serving as an example of how individual acts of courage can have consequences that reach far beyond what anyone could imagine. And the friendship between Sarah Mitchell and Ayanna Ross would continue to inspire others to look beyond surface differences and recognize the common humanity that connects all people.